I've heard the comments. I have seen all of the comments asking for an update as to whether AMD's video encoder, VCE or AMF, on their Navi GPUs has improved with recent driver updates in late 2019 and even the big Adrenaline 2020 update. Supposedly things have improved. Supposedly things were better. Supposedly it's good now, right? Well, as many of you who got impatient with me not talking about it and went to try it for yourself have found out, not so much, but I think there's a lot to be learned here, and I'm super stoked to share this video with you. Today's video is basically an encyclopedia entry, a just full reference of every possible, well, not every possible, unfortunately, but most encoder quality comparisons and thoughts that you could want in terms of video streaming and the different video encoders available to you for use in OBS and other streaming programs. It's a pretty intense video that I've tried to condense down as much as possible, because otherwise I could talk for literally hours about this. And so I just want to get this video out here. This is the encoder quality analysis of 2020, the state of encoders for 2020, as I'm calling it. Let's jump in. This video is brought to you by me and my Stream Guides Instagram page. I finally launched a dedicated Instagram for Stream Guides. If you've ever looked at my own EposVox Instagram, it's more dedicated to retro stuff and, you know, my nerdy nostalgia side of things. So I have a dedicated Stream Guides Instagram, which has OBS tips and things like that. I've got dedicated settings for cropping ultra wide and just little tidbits that I don't make it to a whole video that you can get like that instead of needing to watch a big long video about it. Go to instagram.com/streamguides to follow and stay up to date. Go check it out, please do. And if you're interested in my 80s, 90s nostalgia stuff, go check me out on Instagram as well. Today's video compares pretty much all video encoders that you would be using reasonably for a live stream that runs on mostly modern hardware. We're talking about QuickSync, X264, and HEVC for 9th gen. That's the only one I got to test. We'll talk more about that. Multiple generations of both AMD and NVIDIA's GPU-based video encoders, which apparently was a massive waste of time. We'll talk about that as well as X264 very fast through slow. I didn't include super fast or anything faster than that because this was already hundreds of hours of compute time and work in order to put together, and it just didn't seem like it was worth it, because who's going to be using that if you have these other options available, as you'll see in the charts. To improve upon my previous process, I have made these videos before comparing NVENC versus X264 and throwing in some AMF and things like that. To improve upon my previous processes, I've actually created some standardized tests that I will be using for all encoding processes moving forward that have different segments of games. So I have 4 different video projects that are captured and encoded for these tests losslessly at 1080p 60. They were captured either in ProRes or DNxHR as source footage, native 1080p captures, and then throughout the whole chain stayed at 1080p. So there's no scaling to worry about, there's no generational compression. Wherever possible, either 422 or 444, uncompressed ProRes source footage, which helps a little bit. And then we have, like I mentioned, 4 different segments. So we have the action segment, which has car game tests mostly. So we've got Rocket League, which is a worst case scenario for video encoders for streaming. We've got Forza on the Xbox One. We've got Crash Team Racing on the PS4 Pro. We have a camera scene, which is mostly just a softball, just like easy test. It's just some panning and tilting shots of product B-roll. It is sourced from my 4.6K Ursa Mini Pro, so it's the only one that's not native 1080p. But for the most part, this was just thrown in there just to see how the encoders compared if given literally the best case scenario for like super low bit rates and things like that. Didn't have any like GoPro footage or anything like that. Then we had pixel games, so pixel art games like Celeste, Tempest 4000, and one more dungeon. And then we had a shooters category, which was first-person shooter games, of course. We've got Iron Sight, Apex Legends, Halo 3, and Modern Warfare Remastered. Try to get a balance of ones that aren't the most graphically intensive, but then ones that are known to cause problems for encoding, like Apex Legends was. All of these clips are at least 3 minutes long, and I do not have the data broken down by game because the clips were combined. In future tests, if I want to get super deep on the website posts, then I can have, you know, per game and things like that. But honestly, I don't think people care quite that much. That's more just kind of a deep dive for me, as I want to get the information out to you guys. So I use Netflix's VMAF or VMAF analysis, which does a good job of getting what is basically perceived quality. They use it to test, you know, encoding pipelines for their live streaming service. Of course, like I said, it was over like 200 hours of compute time just to get all of these results. we'll also be looking at visual examples, because the thing with quality analysis is you need data, you need quantitative information, and then you need qualitative analysis, which is looking at it and see if that matches the data. And for the most part, it probably will. There's some kind of little nuancy bits here that we'll talk about as well. Overall though, if you're just looking for a TLDW, AMD is really not in a good spot when it comes to video encoding for H264 for live streaming, for streaming to Twitch, for encoding locally, things like that. And they're in an even worse spot because the maintainer of their encoder plugin for OBS Studio has left the OBS team and is no longer maintaining that plugin. And he was the one that was very much most heavily involved with this and providing the most hands-on experience with it. And so AMD OBS users are going to suffer in the short term. And I really think AMD needs to step it up. I talked about this in a whole episode of Streamer News. It was my main topic for the episode. I'll have it linked below because I had a lot to say about it and I highly recommend you watch it. But combined with the fact that at least this generation of Navi, their video encoders are not doing so hot, combined with them not doing any sort of hands-on or direct involvement in the software development to make that better, AMD is really not in a great spot, and I really think they need to step it up and improve, because both NVIDIA and Intel have actually been kicking some serious butt with regards to this involvement. NVIDIA has been hands-on ever since, I think it's been 2 years now, helping develop a native, more hands-on NVENC plugin for the NVIDIA's encoder, and has been doing a great job with that and supplying documentation, helping develop the zero copy for new NVENC where it stays all on the GPU. They've been really doing a lot to get involved, and Intel's been fairly hands-on with the QuickSync plugin since basically forever. Like, they've been doing a really good job of updating it per generation, adding in new features when new generations come about, and things like that. And so AMD is really the only one that has seemingly dropped the ball when it comes to streamers, and I really hope that they pick it back up soon, because there's a lot of people who feel compelled to use AMD's great hardware and their great, budget-friendly hardware, but are left behind in streaming, especially when their CPUs are doing so amazing for streaming. Their CPUs are some of the best you can get for streaming these days, for dedicated streaming PCs or for single PC streaming. It kind of stinks that those who want to use their graphics cards, I pretty much cannot recommend anyone in the world buy an AMD graphics card for live streaming in 2020, at least, unless supposedly not, RDNA 2 has improvements. I can't do it. And that really stinks given how much I recommend their processors now. It just sucks. So let's look at some of the data and take a look at some of the samples and things like that. We're going to start with the action category, which was, again, the racing games, things like that. I did all of these tests at a few different bit rates. So we got, I think, 1 megabit per second, 2.5 megabits per second, 3.5 megabits per second, 6 megabits per second, 8 and 10. Around 8 and 10 megabits per second for all tests. Pretty much the encoders just normalize, and at the super low bit rates of like 1 and sometimes 2.5 megabits per second, all of these, you'll start to see some weird entries where like fast, very fast might perform better than medium on X264, and the entries shuffle around. Otherwise, for the most part, we have consistent results. And that is because, at least with X264, as I've been trying to convince people here, the CPU usage presets are just that. They are presets, and they are not completely linear quality to performance scaling. And so you're gonna see weird things like that, and that's just how it works. I'm mainly going to be looking at the higher bit rates other than some special notes, but the graphs will be here, and I'll have a website post linked in the video description where I have more of the graphs made readily available. At 3.5 megabits per second in the action category, Turing, so we have different generations of NVIDIA. Turing is their newest encoder generation, which does the best in terms of quality and performance. This is available on the 1650 Super or higher, not the original 1650, and then the RTX 2060 and higher. And then this is, this was a big step up from the 10 series. I have many, many videos about new NVENC versus old NVENC in terms of hardware and software, linked in the video description below. So the new generation, Turing, H264 and H265, as well as Navi, AMD's latest generation of Navi's H265, beat X264 slow, which is kind of the benchmark of if you can beat medium or slow, mainly medium, but if you can definitely beat slow, you're doing a great job. Turing on both codecs as well as Navi's H265 beat slow, which is impressive, fantastic. That is the way to go. As you'll see on all of this, Turing's HEVC pretty much beats out any encoding options that it competes with at any bitrate, which is bonkers, and part of the reason that I think we might start to see this kind of debate not even matter, and I'll talk about that towards the end in the conclusion. Previous generations NVENC is between fast and medium in terms of X264 benchmarks. Unfortunately, Navi's H264, which is the new one, was between very fast and faster. So it has improved a little bit because previously in my testing, it was more closer to very fast than super fast still, which was not ideal. So it has improved a tiny bit, moving it between very fast and faster. As you can see, the older generations AMD encoders are slower, or are lower quality than very fast, but it still doesn't compete with pretty much anything else. Bumping up to 6 megabits per second, Turing again beats slow. Navi's H264 is now between fast and medium, so with enough bitrate, it is starting to compete a little bit more with X264. Navi's H265 is now between fast and medium, no longer beating slow, strangely enough. Old NVENC on, pretty much all older generations, there was little improvement among basically roughly 7 series NVENC all the way up to 10 series NVENC. There was very little improvement, if any at all. Those all stick between faster and fast. And then old AMD encoder as well as Navi's H264 is still lower quality than very fast X264. You get the idea where this is going. I wanted to note here, I do not have a test for 6th gen NVIDIA 600 series cards because my 660 literally just would not encode anything. It's doing so poorly, so rip to that, but that's fine. We don't need that data point. I just wanted to quickly show off one of the 1 megabit per second tests with this action scene, in that old AMD encoder is between fast and very fast, which is not bad. Very fast actually beats fast and faster for X264, and medium beats slow. Again, weird things happen when you don't have enough bitrate. You start to see some weird results. Navi's H264 is better than most X264 CPU usage presets by a touch. Pretty much all NVENC encodings are better than X264 at this absurdly low bitrate, and then Navi's H265 is better than everything except Turing's H265 at this very low bitrate. Changing over to the camera scene, again, NVENC beats everything. Again, at 1 megabit per second, this is the absurd low bit rate, but again, the camera scene doesn't need a lot. NVENC is actually trained on a hardware level for live action camera footage because it's used in production studios, in DaVinci Resolve, in those kinds of scenarios. On a hardware level, it's most optimized for camera footage. This is directly from my NVIDIA contact. I've been working with them with regards to what the coder is built for. On a hardware level, it is most optimized for live action camera footage. And then it is the software level that is integrated into the SDK and OBS and things like that, that then trains it and optimizes it for gameplay. And so that's why you see, honestly, much better results using these encoders with live action footage than you might with gameplay, as all the GPU encoders are supposed to be trained and optimized for specific scenarios. I don't even know if AMD is doing that. NVENC is trained at a hardware level to always be optimized for camera footage, and then the software is then utilized for gameplay. So at this absurdly low bitrate, NVENC beats everything. Navi's H265 does beat Turing's NVENC H264, which is fine, but Turing H265 or HEVC, those are interchangeable, again, beats everything. Bumping it up to 3.5 megabits per second, NVENC beats X264, again, tuned for camera footage. Navi's H265 also beats X264, but Turing's HEVC or H265 is still on top. Going up to 6 megabits per second, Navi's HEVC is between medium and faster, not too bad, but Navi's H264 is between very fast and fast, which is still not ideal. Roughly with this footage, it performs between very fast and fast, so around X264 faster equivalent, which is still pretty good, especially compared to some of the gaming results, but not what we were hoping for. Bumping up to 8 megabits per second, again, this is an example of the quality normalizing out once you have enough bitrate. Navi's H264 is in line with all other AMD encoders. Jumping over to the pixel art gameplay, where it really, especially at 1 megabit per second here, crushes the encoder, Navi's H265 or HEVC is actually pretty competitive, and the Navi H264 is still between fast and medium, which is not bad, but this is a really dumb bitrate to encode these games at, especially at 1080p. Bumping up to 3.5 megabits per second, Navi's H264 just can't keep up at all. Navi's HEVC beats X264 fast, which is fairly impressive. At 6 megabits per second, which makes more sense for this gameplay, Navi's H264 is some of the worst on this entire chart, which really doesn't surprise me, but sucks. Surprises me that it's still performing this poorly. Navi's H265 or HEVC is not that much better here. GCN or the R9 290X H264s is somehow performing okay here. That one just did fine. And then NVENC still competes with slow X264. Moving over to our last set of gameplay samples. At 1 megabits per second for shooters, AMD's H264 competes with X264 pretty great. You're not going to get much usable footage out of this anyway. AMD's overall H264 is actually competing with X264 here, even on older generations. Navi specifically is between very fast and medium for HEVC. The H264 is actually doing pretty well, as is QuickSync here. But again, at this bit rate, you're not getting a whole lot. At 3.5 megabits per second, AMD's H264 for overall is just not doing great at all, and QuickSync is not doing much better. Old NVENC is between X264 fast and medium already. Navi's H265 or HEVC is between medium and slow, which is phenomenal. Turing and QuickSync's HEVC beat slow entirely. So real quick, this is what I was talking about both at launch of the Navi cards and in my previous comparison. The focus of the encoder clearly for this generation of cards has been improving the HEVC encoder, which I believe is used for some of these streaming services. I think AMD Now, I don't think it's called that, but you know, their game streaming service to your phone or whatever, they have their own, like NVIDIA has theirs, and they're very much optimizing for this and the equivalent usage on the server side, because pretty much anything AMD develops is server first and then adapted down to, you know, customer side, end user, consumer side, that's the word I was looking for. And so that's kind of what we're seeing here, is their HEVC encoder is still not as good as NVIDIA's Turing encoder, but still way better than any of their previous generations of H264. And a lot of this is the reason why. On top of the fact that HEVC on the whole for HD and higher resolutions is just that much better of an encoder. Lastly, at 6 megabits per second here, AMD's H264 is just not doing well for shooters at all. It is just bad looking, as I covered back in my previous comparison, only focusing on shooters. QuickSync H264 is also having a bad time here. Navi's HEVC or H265 is between faster and fast, which isn't ideal, but it's still pretty good. Would still benefit a lot of people here if you could use HEVC. Old NVENC is between fast and medium, so still beating out HEVC from an AMD in this case, which is something. QuickSync HEVC is actually very close to medium, which is quite impressive for that little iGPU encoder. That was tested on a 9900K, by the way. 10th gen is supposed to be even better, but we don't have 10th gen hardware to test. NVENC on Turing beats out medium and slow. So what you should take away from all of this and looking at some samples and things like that, NVENC is just absolutely dominating right now. NVIDIA is not paying me a dime to say this. I wish they would in some cases, because I could use the money to pay for my upcoming baby that is dropping any minute now. I said that like a product announcement. Epos baby here for you, 2020. I don't know. Anyway, NVENC is just destroying right now in terms of quality, and AMD really needs to kick it up for streamers. I did not expect the disparity between these two to still be so significant, especially from the HEVC side, which is just astounding to me. Intel actually seems to be doing pretty good work and contributes directly to OBS, and had just recently sent, which I got Intel to send me the specs over for, sent over 10th gen updates to OBS not long ago. And I don't have any 10th gen hardware to test the encoders, and I appreciate that some people have reached out and offered, you know, they have laptops and stuff with it to test, but I can't send you the hundreds of gigabytes of files to test and then you have the space for it and then run hundreds of hours of encoding tests and then give that back. Like, that just doesn't work out. I need hardware in you know, studio to test that for. But Intel is actually pretty quietly just kicking butt on their own encoder, trying to, you know, make things better and contributing to OBS on the whole. Whereas AMD isn't directly contributing to any of these projects, isn't improving their encoder so far at all. You know, you saw generations kind of bounce around overall, but the new Navi generation is only marginally better than older AMD generations in some scenarios. And they're just not getting directly involved, and that's really unfortunate. A couple things AMD really needs to work on is helping the developers of all streaming software, not just OBS, I'm talking about OBS a lot here, but all software, understand the encoder and how it works, because honestly, it doesn't work the same as other encoders and can be quite confusing. And the previous maintainer of the OBS plugin for AMD, Zaymar, I found many GitHub requests where they just had to simply ask, what the heck does half of this mean? Because anytime they tried out, they got no results, or they just couldn't find an explanation for it. A lot of it is undocumented. And so explaining that, as well as helping them set up the zero copy, the what the new NVENC encoder in OBS implemented last year. The zero copy, keeping it all on the GPU, would benefit performance-wise significantly, and really just getting more hands-on would benefit greatly. I will say the actual engineers over at AMD seem to be doing a pretty good job. They're working to improve the encoder and the software for it the best they can. And even when I had questions for it, because in my testing for this, I ran into some issues where none of my tests, because I was testing all of this at CBR for streaming bit rates, I couldn't get a consistent CBR out of the encoder with FFmpeg, nor Handbrake, which is based on FFmpeg, but clearly, like, if they didn't set it up right in Handbrake, then it's not just me. And posted in the FFmpeg forum, posted on Twitter a few times, couldn't get any results. Went to AMD's AMF GitHub, and very quickly they asked they asked what I needed, and the engineers got back to me with exactly what I needed to change in it. I hope Handbrake can implement this as well, because currently CBR is pretty busted in Handbrake, but you need to set specific parameters in order for CBR to even work. They got back to me very quickly. They have been very communicative, working with me and Window on the past and things like that, doing a good job there. It seems to be there is some sort of communication wall or barrier with kind of the upper level people that are in control over at AMD that don't want that to happen. And I actually reached out through their PR firm, asking if AMD would be stepping it up to get more hands-on with the encoder implementation in OBS, given that the maintainer has left. And they seem to just not even understand the question, and they just gave me some answer that OBS is an open source program, it's maintained by Jim as well as the team, and they will be who's handling it moving forward. And I'm just like, seriously? So I don't know, guys. AMD's encoder is not in a great spot. I don't recommend an AMD graphics card for encoding whatsoever, and I won't be until they improve it, which will, at this point, it seems like it'll have to be RDNA 2 or Big Navi or whatever, if then, because it doesn't seem like a priority for them. And until then, NVIDIA is going to continue to have market dominance for streamers. And even with all the complaints I see, we have people on my Discord all the time talking about how unstable their driver software is and what is their Relive is and things like that. Like, I can't in good faith recommend an AMD graphics card for any streaming purpose or recording purpose. Obviously, if you're recording, especially with Relive, you can use HEVC encoders and get higher, more efficient bit rates and things like that, but that's not officially supported in OBS, and no streaming service supports it. So for streaming specifically, where the low bit rate is actually, where that matters, you can't do anything. I feel like it's pretty crappy to have left things in the state that they are. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video that perhaps I'm just obsessing over something that may not matter soon. We are reaching a point where I feel like we are months away, maybe a year or two away, from things radically changing on the game streaming front in terms of what's supported. Either services like Twitch will open up servers to higher bandwidth encode or ingests, and you can send higher bit rates, and that normalizes a lot of this, as I mentioned, because if you can send 10, 12 megabits per second for those who have the internet connection to support it, and they have the infrastructure to transcode that for people who can't watch that bit rate, then quality's fine. No need to worry about it. We may also start to see services that start to support other encoders, assuming the actual encoders on the GPU start to come out. I'm really hoping next-gen NVIDIA and next-gen AMD start to implement VP9 or AV1 encoders on the GPU, which have significantly higher efficiency compared to even HEVC. Well, AV1 does. VP9's about on the same as HEVC. And then that Twitch and other sites will start to accept that for ingest. The issue here is, currently, HEVC is the best option for encoding. GPUs can do it really freaking fast, and they can do it really, really high quality. Some of my big, massive, 30-minute 4K 60 videos get crunched down to 2 gigabytes with HEVC and DaVinci Resolve, and the quality is still stellar because of how efficient it is. But it comes with some absurd licenses that streaming services and even most programs do not feel like paying, and thus the patent wars have prevented it from coming. VP9 is sort of apparently still struggling with that, but still an option that doesn't have quite as many problems and might be a better solution, and that is what Google currently uses for most YouTube encodes already as a bandwidth saving measure, but we could use this to get higher bitrate efficiency for our bits so that a 6 megabit per second stream to Twitch would be much higher quality in general. That would be an option. Or AV1, there's now an open source AV1 encoder that is performing very, very well. If we could get any of that as a GPU encoder and get performance up to real time, easily for everybody on next-gen AMD or next-gen NVIDIA, and then streaming services accept that as an input feed, because there's definitely no license issues there as far as I've been able to tell. the world would change in terms of stream quality. So I don't know if AMD's just kind of playing their bets and calling everyone's bluff that this is going to be coming soon, or if they are really just not that invested in the streaming scene and they're only using it for marketing. Either way, things are not looking great for AMD in this department. Things are looking really great for NVIDIA, and I actually have some customized NVENC settings to show you in a future video, so get subscribed with that. That makes NVENC H264 for streams pretty much beat out X264 by any worthwhile usage for it, which is pretty bonkers. But at some point, I hope things change, because currently a lot of streams look pretty bad. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button if you did. Subscribe for more tech education and stream guides. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at StreamGuides or EposVox if you're interested, of course. I am your stream professor, EposVox. If you have more questions or want to talk about this more, join us on Discord, eposvox.com/Discord. Otherwise, subscribe, sub on Patreon or Floatplane for early access to videos and behind the scenes content. I'll see you next time.